Welcome back. In this second video, I'm going to finish building my new belt sander. I will start with this metal plate that will go under the belt. I'll also make the pulleys for the traction wheel and motor. I will use this galvanized steel plate I had in my workshop. I'll cut it down to size with an angle grinder. I stick it onto the plywood like this with double-sided tape. After cutting the pieces we need for the motor pulley, I drill a hole with a bit with the same diameter as the shaft. This rebate for the slanted part of the motor shaft will prevent the pulley from stopping while the motor rotates. I insert the pulley in the shaft, being careful not to damage the motor, and attach this lid like this to lock the pulley in the shaft. I've attached the motor to my workbench to make the pulleys. First I'll use a roughing gouge. Then I'll use other smaller gouges to make a groove for the V-belt. I'll double check every now and then to see whether the pulley is adjusted to the belt. Now onto the traction wheel pulley. We could easily make it with a lathe, but I'll try to create it in the same way as the previous one. After fastening it to the motor shaft, I'll follow the same steps as before. Now all that's left is to make a hole for its shaft. It's not the best way to make it centered and balanced, but hopefully it'll work. I put the motor in place and mark the positions of its screws. I make the holes and put the screws in to attach it to the base of the sander. This is the piece that will hold and lock the traction wheel pulley. I'll make a hole here with a bit whose diameter is 0.5 millimeter smaller than the screw. I put the screw in place. The thread it will carve when inserting it will be enough to hold the pulley. I apply glue, and for safety reasons I'll add a couple of screws. After making sure the pulley is at the same height as the motor pulley, I tighten the screw to mark its position on the rod. I make a flat rebate for the screw right where the mark is. We could also make a small hole with a bit. Now I put the pulley back in place and finally tighten its screw. I'll make the belt's tensioning wheel out of a piece of plywood. First I make a hole for the bearing. Now with a hole saw I cut the wheel. I insert the bearing, and with this piece of plywood and a screw that will act as axis, I will round off the wheel with the help of the sanding disc. Now I can install the belt to mark the position of the tensioning wheel. I think this much tension will be enough. I mark and drill a hole for the threaded insert. I'm going to use this piece of steel pipe as buffer, and now I can put the tensioning wheel in place. It seems to be working correctly. The traction wheel pulley could be a little more balanced, but I think it'll do the job just fine. Now that I can make the big wheel spin, it's a good time to smooth it out and make it line up perfectly with a base using P80 grit sandpaper stuck to a piece of plywood. I'll also use this makeshift wooden piece, having made sure it's at a 90-degree angle with the base. I start sanding the wheel until it's perfectly smooth. Now would be a good time to apply some epoxy resin on all the wheels. This way the big one will have a better grip on the belt, and the aluminum ones will keep the belt in position while sanding. This Allen bolt will function as rotation axis for the piece that tightens the belt. I cut the pieces I need to the right size and shape them with the sanding disc. Using an angle grinder, I make a groove in this Allen bolt. In it, I will put a wooden screw to lock the plywood pieces to the Allen bolt. Since I'm using a used motor, I had to make a small compartment to fit its capacitors. I took advantage of this gap in the bottom of the base. I've also installed a switch to turn on the sander comfortably from the front. I screw the rest of the frame pieces in place. For the top we could use 9mm thick plywood and glue a Formica sheet onto it. It would work perfectly. I happened to come across this HPL panel piece in a nearby carpenter store, just the thing I needed. I need to make a rebate to attach it to the sander, so I make one with the table saw and the jigsaw. Also, with the sander itself, I will finish sanding the gap. I make some holes and now I can screw in the panel to the base of the sander. Now all that's left is to make the dust collection system. I cut all the pieces and after making sure they're the right size, I screw them together. I've marked the circumference of the vacuum tube, although other tube diameters could be used. As always, I make a handle with a hole saw to hold the dust collection system. I mark the position of the hole on the base of the sander. If you want to use plywood, you will have to use a threaded inset here. In this case I won't need it because the HPL panel is easy to thread. With the jigsaw, I finish machining the groove that will allow me to rotate the dust collection system, and my new sander is finally complete. Thank you for watching this video through to the end. See you soon!